In actually about a week and a half, I moved into my house in 1984. September 30th, 1984. Was that 34 years ago or something? And I like to say, by the grace of God, I found the little town of Bynum. Y'all are familiar with Bynum? Yeah, it's a little tiny mill village about 3 miles from here, right near the big, giant flooding Haw River. But it's way up on the hill. Very safe. And that wasn't what I planned. It wasn't what I had envisioned that I was going to do at all. It was something different. And you know, life is that a lot of times. It's not what we planned. It's not what we have, mapped out for ourselves. It's not what we envisioned. It's just what happens. And it's not good or it's not bad. It's just different. And what I had planned was to get married. Chris and I had dated for almost 4 years. And he had bugged me for 3 of those 4 years to get married, but I wanted to get my college degree. I grew up in the mountains. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I wanted to get my college degree. I wanted to get my job, and then I wanted to get married and then start having kids with that man. We were going to buy a Victorian. He lived down in Charlotte. We were going to buy a Victorian over in Raleigh near Bowling Heights and renovate it and, have a half a dozen children and spend our nights peeling wallpaper and turning that grand dame of a house back into, a vision of her former grand self. But we were going to get married in Thanksgiving, and on August 2nd in Charlotte, there was an accident with a concrete truck, and Chris was killed. And I can't tell you what happened the next few days. I literally do not want to remember. But I will tell you this. I came home from the funeral. My parents were with me from Bavard, and I took off my dress, and I took off my shoes, and I stuffed it in the kitchen trash can. I didn't want to ever see those clothes again. I didn't ever want to feel the sadness that was in the folds of them. I didn't want someone to come across that garment in the thrift shop and put it on and somehow be enveloped by it. I stuffed it in the trash can, and in my stockings and my slip, I went to the bedroom and I went to bed. And I stayed there for 3 days. My mom made sure I had something to eat. I could actually get up and go to the bathroom, and then I would start thinking about maybe I should take a shower, and I would just start getting overwhelmed, and it was all I could do just to get back in bed and climb back up and get under the comforter and tie myself up in a little tiny ball and stare at the wall. It's all I could do. I couldn't even hardly speak. After this, about the 3rd or 4th day, my friend Linda came by to see me, to see how I was doing and offer my parents strength. And I was laying in bed again with my face against the wall, and I heard my father talking to her in the living room, and I heard the tremble in his voice. And he said, "We're just going to have to take her home. That's all we can do. We're just going to have to take her home." It's one thing to lose the love of your life. It's something else to not be able to live your life because of that. But it's something 10 times that magnitude to know that the people that love you are standing around that big dark, soft, warm, black hole you're in, and watching and waiting and praying and yearning for you to come out. No matter what it took of me, I was going to have to get out of bed. I got up and I went to the bathroom, and without thinking, I got in the shower. I pulled off my slip that I'd had on for 3 days. I took a shower and I got out, and without thinking, I got a toothbrush and I started brushing my teeth, and I had to drop it and I had to grab hold of the sink, and I started to cry again. And I said, God, please give me strength. I held on to the side of the sink with my hands. And I may have been there 5 minutes. I may have been there 5 hours. I don't know. All I know is I held on to the sink and I prayed. And then I picked up my toothbrush and I rinsed it off and I started brushing my teeth again like a real human being is supposed to. And I wrapped up in a towel and got my bathrobe off the back of the door, and I went to the kitchen. And I got my mom and my dad and my friend Linda together, and I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know what my life is going to look like, but I'm going to do my very, very best to live it, whatever my life may be. My parents stayed a couple more days. Like I said, I took every bit of strength I had to go through the motion of what a real person is supposed to do. I got up, I ate breakfast, I put on clothes, I smiled, I nodded, I talked a little bit, I helped my mom cook some. I took the cat outside and sat in the chair in the sunshine and talked to my dad here and there. And after a couple of days, I finally convinced him to go home. They only left because my friend Linda agreed to come back and sleep on the couch. Well, after a couple of days of making do and going through the motions with her, I finally got her to go home too. And it was just me and the cat, Russell. A couple of weeks later, it was one of those rare days in August. I was living in this old rinky-dink trailer out on 54 on the west of Chapel Hill near the Cane Creek Reservoir. And it was the 1950s. I call it the Florida Special trailer. The sink was pink and the stove was turquoise. And the bathroom fixtures were gray and turquoise. It was the deluxe model from 1958. And the only problem is it had these little bitty tiny windows. They rolled out, and each window was about 30 or 40 little tiny panes of glass. And every single one of those little panes would roll out, but when you rolled it back in, there would be like a half-inch gap. And like I said, every window had like 30 panes of glass with a half-inch gap. And my dad said the whole place was a death trap. I'd been living in an apartment, and I just needed a cheap place to live for a few months because me and Chris were going to be buying the house, and we were going to be getting married. So I had just found the $150 a month trailer and moved in. And my dad looked at that oil burner furnace in it, and he says, whatever happens, if it starts getting cold in October and you're still here, do not turn on that furnace. It will kill you. You will die. So I knew I had to find another place to live, and pretty quick. It was already, getting the third week of August or so. But it was one of those rare days in August when the sun was shining. We had a couple of them, 3 weeks ago before all the rain started again. And it was clear and the sky was blue and it was about 78 degrees. And I opened up every one of those roll-out windows and I opened up all the doors. And I cleaned that old trailer that with the pink stove and the gray bathroom and the turquoise refrigerator from one end to the other, the whole place. I turned it wrong side out and shook the rugs, everything. It felt so good just to do something that was real and concrete. And, my muscles needed it. My body needed it. My mind needed it. But like I said, I knew I had to have a place to live. So instead of fixing supper, I went down to the little local grocer, convenience store, and I got a sandwich at the grill, and I got a newspaper, and it was Wednesday. It was the real estate edition. And I went home with my sandwich, and I spread the newspaper out on the table, and my cat, Russell, always helped me read the newspaper. He would sit with his butt right in the middle of the page I was trying to read, and I'm trying to eat my sandwich and read the paper. And whenever it was time for me to turn the page, I'd have to scooch him off the paper, and he'd walk out to the end of the newspaper, and I'd flip the page, and he'd immediately walk back and sit right down in the middle, plop down in the middle of it again. And about the fourth or fifth page into the real estate section, I thought, well, I'm going to get a piece of land and just put a camper on it and live in a tent if I have to. It'll be okay. It's all right. I just have to own the place where I live. I didn't want to live in an apartment. I couldn't deal with that anymore, apartment complex in Chapel Hill. So about the fourth or fifth page in, I see this little picture of this little cottage in Bynum. It's tin roof. You could just barely see the front door for the shade off the porch, but you could tell there was a swing on it. And I looked at that and I said, well, look at that, Russell. You look at that. And it's my first step into becoming a crazy cat lady. I said, look at that. That looks like a place me and you could live. It's a little house. It was $28,800. And I said, well, but problem is I can't afford a house. I just couldn't. So I pushed him out to the end of the page. I flipped and he came back and plopped his butt down right in the middle of the newspaper again. And I kept looking page after page, him going back and forth and plopping down. And 4 or 5 pages later, the back of my head, there was something bothering me. And I started doing some math. If I bought a piece of land for $10,000 or $15,000 and put in a septic tank and a well and a driveway and bought even a rinky-dink camper or trailer, that was going to cost me we were looking at like $25,000 at the minimum. And that house was only $28,800. And it was such a good idea. It was such an epiphany. I didn't even stop. I was afraid if I thought about it at all, I was gonna talk myself out of it. It was crazy, absolutely crazy, or it was the most brilliant thing I'd ever thought of. Whatever. I got my purse and I ran and I got in the car and I drove to University Mall in Chapel Hill to the real estate agent's office. It was this fellow named Bill Olson. Bill Olson's a big, tall fellow, was bald-headed, had a giant forehead and eyebrows and sort of big, bulging eyes. And he was all elbows and knees and kind of hunched over, giant Adam's apple the size of your fist. And he put me in a green station wagon. It was a land ship, green station wagon. And he takes me down to the little town of Bynum. I didn't even know where Bynum was. I'd never heard of Bynum. Well, it's right on the banks of the Haw River, and it was a cotton mill town. And we come into Bynum and come over the hill, and that land ship is rocking and rolling from side to side as we go around the curves. And we come around the curve, and there's a cotton mill still running 3 shifts, the river just beyond, and up the hill, like a little monopoly village, are these white clapboard houses, all with tin roofs and all with front porches. I grew up on a dairy farm outside a sawmill town in the mountains of North Carolina. The sawmill was down next to the river. Everybody worked there. They lived in the little mill houses going up the hill. I knew exactly who those people were. I knew what their values were, and I knew that I needed to live here. I knew before I even saw my house that was where I was going to live. And we come around the curve, and sure enough, there's the front porch and a big begonia and a swing and a tin roof. And inside, under 5 layers of brown paint, there was heart pine floors. And there wasn't a single surface, walls, ceiling, floor, door jambs, mold. There wasn't a single surface where you could say, knock wood, and it wouldn't be wood. I had to live there. Well, Bill Olson, being a really good real estate agent that he was, and a fine fella, he was a Rotarian, he puts me back in that land-shipped green station wagon, and we go out and around and over and hill and over dale of Chatham County, and he shows me to 4 or 5 other houses, and finally about the 5th house, I stopped him, and I said, I want to buy the house in the corner in Bynum. I want the first house I looked at. And he says, well, now, Cynthia, nobody ever buys the first house that they look at. And I looked up at him, grinned great big. He was 6'4" and all hard. I looked up at him, I grinned, and I said, Mr. Bill Olson, I'm going to. And I'd grown up, and my parents had a real estate business in the mountains. Before the flipper shows or whatever, they flipped real estate for a living. That was their job. That's what they did, and I'd grown up in it, and so I haggled. I knew what a good deal was. So I haggled like I didn't love the place. And after a week of going back and forth and splitting the difference, I got them down to $24,400 when they wouldn't split the difference anymore. That was Friday before Labor Day. Bill Olson called me at work, and I got off the phone, turned around, and called my mom in Bavard. First time I'd even mentioned it. And I said, Mama, I found a house I want to buy. My parents, Bavard is 6.5, 7 hours, depending, especially before the interstate was built all the way. 6.5, 7 hours from Bavard to here, depending on traffic. 7.5 hours later, they were standing in my living room in that rinky-dink trailer in Chapel Hill, outside Chapel Hill. And they really seriously thought that I was crazy, because the last time they had seen me, honestly, they could have fed me baby food with a spoon and I wouldn't have spit it back at them. And here I was talking about I was going to buy a house. They said, she must have snapped. But the real reason was there was a real estate going down and they hadn't had a part of it. The next morning, it's Saturday before Labor Day weekend, we drive into the little town of Bynum, and about 5 houses up from the one I wanted to buy was a 2-story house, and I'm going to say, we'll call them Frank and Sylvia, lived there. And Frank was sitting on one side of the front steps, and there was a pyramid of Budweiser cans level with the porch beside him. And Sylvia was sitting on the other side of the front porch, the steps, and there was a level with the porch pyramid of Busch cans beside her. And there's kids playing on big wheels, all kinds of broken toys, bicycles, car parts. And just the icing on the cake, there was a giant Cadillac under a pecan tree, and the engine was hanging out of it off the branches. And my mom, being the fastidious woman that she is, being the fine Southern Baptist that she is, being the awesome, wonderful mother hen that she is, turned around to me in the back seat and said, Cynthia, are you sure you want to live here? And I said, Mama, these people are going to take care of me when nobody else would. If I need soup when I'm sick, or a tire changed, or a jump start, or a tree cut, whatever, they're going to take care of me like you would yourself. and maybe even better. I'm going to be safer here than I ever was in an apartment complex in Chapel Hill. And my father, in a rare moment of loquaciousness, turned to her and said, "She's right, honey, you need to shut up." He very rarely said very much, especially to my mama, in that tone of voice, but he did that day. Well, I bought the house, $24,400. I moved in, like I said, September 30th. And me and Russell the cat, I was happy as a clam. Happy as a clam, whatever that means, I was happy. And it wasn't what I'd planned or what I'd envisioned, but it was different and it was good. About 3 weeks after I moved in, a feral mama cat had kittens underneath my back steps. There was 4 of them. December 10th or so, we had an ice storm, a big, giant, huge, like 8 inches of ball-bearing sleet, and then the temperature dropped. And I was stuck at home, and I was so glad to have my snug little, cottage with fireplace and my 2 kitties and the 4 kittens. And I went out to get the mail about 2 o'clock that afternoon, and there was this old yellow dog sitting up on the hill above in my yard. And I looked up there at him up there, and it was sun shining, but it was only 24 degrees. And I said, "Well, puppy," I said, "you found a spot of sunshine, but you're going to be hard-pressed to find a warm spot today." And I went on and got my mail, went back in the house. And right at dark, about 5:30 or so, I went back out to call the cats in. They had went out for a little bit, and to get Russell and Dinah, the feral mama kitty, to get her back in before it got much colder. It was already like 18, and the temperature was dropping fast. And they were sitting at the edge of the porch looking out towards the yard, towards the darkness. And I thought, what are they looking at? And then I realized that old yellow dog was still up there at the edge of the driveway. And he was lost, or he was abandoned, or somebody had dumped him out. He didn't have a home. So I opened the door and invited him into mine. Now, Dinah, the mama kitty, she hated him. Every fiber of her being, she hated dogs, him especially. But Russell, being a good cat, he could care less. And the kittens loved him. He would lay on the rug in front of the fireplace, and they would jump on him and pull his ears and play, whack-a-mole with his tail. And he would sit there and look at me and just smile, look at me and grin. He was happy as he could be. And then it really sunk in. This was not what I had planned. My life was not what I envisioned even just a few months before. But whatever it was good. And even then, in the back of my mind, I knew, even in the state I was in, the place from where I had come, I knew, by the grace of God, I had found the little town of Bynum. Thank you.